In order to install the transcode service that ships with VideoLX 2.0, the very first thing you will do is on a Windows Server box, like I have Windows Server 2012, you will run the Zoom Server installer, and the installer will bring up an option to set up the Zoom transcode service. And once the transcode service is installed, it will be running in the background on the Windows Server. Then you can go and configure the transcode service. So all you have to do is click on this and start the installation process. Okay, so in order to configure the transcode service, you must have a Zoom MAM server already installed and ready to go. Now, if you are purchasing the Evolphin cloud-based hosting service, then the MAM server would already be set up for you, and you just need to ask Evolphin for the MAM server configuration detail in order to point the transcode server to a MAM server. If the MAM server is not on the cloud, it's on premise, then you can run the same installer that I showed you when we were installing the transcode service, and you can install the Zoom MAM server using the Zoom server installer. The GUI will guide you, and once the Zoom server and the preview server are set up, we have a getting started help guide on our website, and that can teach you how to configure the MAM server. So there are a lot of defaults that are built in, and it should take you no more than 5 minutes to get a server running. Of course, if you want to configure the metadata, that might be a bit more involved, and we'll get into that in another session. This session is focused on VideoLX and transcoding server. So I'm assuming at this point that the MAM server is ready to go. So if you go over to the control panel on the web administration service, this is the web administration service pointing to the local server that's running the MAM server. You will go over to the repository setting, and in here, if you have the license for VideoLX, you can enable the VideoLX module. So make sure this checkbox is not off, that it should be turned on. And once you turn on the checkbox for VideoLX, you can go ahead and hit save, and that will allow you to do the VideoLX service setup. So after the service is turned on, so over here you will see VideoLX group in the navigation, and if you click on the ingest settings, this is where you would configure the VideoLX service. So there are a couple of things in here that you need to keep in mind. Most of the values would be defaulted, like for metadata for the low-res proxy, the metadata for the high-res file, all of these would be defaulted. The only thing that you probably would need to touch is the extensions, or the basically which assets file types have to be treated as high-res. So when you are ingesting high-res media, you might have MOV, MXF files, MP4, etc. You would just put the list of supported extensions in here that you want to treat as high-res. If you don't put it in here, it would be treated as a direct ingest asset and would get checked in directly into the Zoom servers. So just make sure you put the right settings. And then the other important thing would be to set up the file size threshold. So right now this is set to 1 MB, and you can set it to a higher limit, like perhaps 1 GB. What this is saying is any video file that matches these extensions that is larger than this threshold, the size, would be treated as high-res. Anything that is less than this would be treated as low-res asset, and it would get checked in directly into the MAM server. So it's really important to get this size right. I should also point out that if you use our Adobe panels and do an export from like After Effects or Premiere, those are always treated as direct asset, and they get checked in into the MAM server. So these are the only two settings that you need to typically set up. Now there's one other setting, which is the placeholder file for the proxy. So the idea is when you ingest the high res, initially Zoom will check in a placeholder with the thumbnail of the video that you are ingesting. And so when somebody plays back, it will play back this placeholder. So you can use any default basically video as a placeholder. Okay, now once you have done the ingest server settings, then now you're ready to configure the transcode box. if you go over to the transcode server, so this is a window box where we are running the Zoom transcoding service we installed in step 1. So all you have to do is specify the MAM server which this transcoding service should talk to check in the low-res proxy, the port, and the user credentials to allow us to access the MAM server. And then you can choose a nice name for this machine. Keep in mind that we can support multiple transcoding boxes. So typically each business unit or a department could have its own transcode server, and by giving it a unique name, this ensures that you know where the transcode is happening and you can identify that. So once you put these values into this form, you just click on save, and that will cause this service to be registered. So then you can jump into the transcode setting, and for example, now we have set up a Evolphin transcoder, and this allows the MAM to automatically send transcode requests to the registered machines. The other thing that you might want to configure is the third-party mount point. So this is basically the external storage. It could be a NAS or a SAN that is going to hold your high-res asset. So typically this is going to be on-premise. The MAM server could be on the cloud, and of course the transcoding service needs to be next to the storage. So if the SAN and NAS is on-premise, then the transcode service would be running on-premise. So the transcode service needs to know where to find the high-res asset at. So that's why you need to specify the mount point to the transcode service. If this is running on a Windows box, you could use a UNC path like //myNAS/ whatever the path is, or a drive letter. And then you can also specify which project vaults is this transcoder associated with. So for each business unit, you might have a separate Zoom project vault, and if so, then you can select which project vault will this transcoder be for. So you could have, let's say, 5 different brands with 5 different transcoders, and each of them could use a specific project vault. And that way, any check-in that happens, any sync that happens into these project vaults for high-res asset will go to the specific brand-specific transcoder. And then you also have to install the client, and the client can be installed using client installer. So if you go over here, you can find the Zoom client DMG for Mac. For Windows, there will be an MSI. You just run that, that will install the client, and then you configure the client to talk to the MAM server. Now, the client configuration is similar to a typical Zoom client configuration. You would end up with essentially settings that specify where the server is, and you can click on add, specify the server URL, and that's it. Once the client is connected to the server, you can start going through this workflow. Okay, so let's say I wanted to ingest a couple of these videos. So these could be anywhere on your desktop, or these could be on a camera card. You just select the clips, and all you have to do is drag and drop the clips into this asset browser interface. And when you do that, you will get a check-in dialog that will show you all the clips that are being ingested, and you will see a option here, copy on ingest, that will automatically be selected. So what this means is these high-res files from the camera card or from a drive would be copied to the SAN location that you have configured with the transcoding service. So remember the PSAN setting that we did, that's where the assets will go to. And you can specify metadata. This is a standard metadata configuration. There's a web-based editor that you can use to configure the metadata and set it up as required or optional. But once that is set up, you can then enter the value in here, and it will apply to all these assets. So right now we have the city, and we have brand, and we have episode. You can set up whatever drop down you want. That's all. Any metadata schema, basically fields that we support, can be used here. So then what you're going to do is click on check-in, and as soon as you click on check-in, this dialog will disappear, and Zoom will basically place a placeholder in as version 1 for the high-res asset. It'll copy the high-res media to the SAN, and you will see a link icon show up in this interface. So the link icon will show you the path to the high-res asset. You can see it's pointing to the PSAN location. And if you click on this link icon, it'll show you the path here. So So this is to the PSAN folder that we have. You can see that this is where the high-res file ends up in. The actual proxy is going to be transcoded and will be checked in as version 2. So again, version 1 is the placeholder, that just a thumbnail of the video with a placeholder video, and it's going to point to the high-res after ingest. And then once the transcoding is finished, then you will see version 2 show up. So how does the transcoder get to generate the version 2 and check it into the MAM? So let's take a look at the transcoder setting. So if we go over to the transcode process, these are all the transcode processes that are running in the system or are finished. And you can then click on any particular job and get more details. So for example, that leaf shot before that we were transcoding shows up here. You can see the thumbnail. You can see that this one successfully transcoded. You can also open this in Zoom. So if you click open in Zoom, it will open up a web client and you will be able to play back the video. So this is the same video that we ingested, and this is playing back a low-res proxy of this video that was transcoded by the transcoding system. And inside the asset browser, if we go back to the asset browser, we will see the version 2. And with version 2, we can also press spacebar and play back the same video in the asset browser. The high-res file, again, is sitting on the SAN location that's over here. The other thing to note is the metadata for these videos is automatically updated. So if you look at the video properties, this shows you the metadata for the native video, and then this is the metadata for the low-res proxy. And there is ability for you to tweak the size of these proxies by changing things like bitrate, etc. And there are some default conversion recipes that are bundled with Zoom. So you typically don't have to do anything. You can just use the default conversion recipe. But once the proxies are created, then you can use the familiar Zoom Premiere or After Effects panel to work with these assets. This is there in all the video editing apps that we support, including Premiere. You will be able to browse through this asset. And if you have linked with any of these footages, you can do hover scrub to see the footage. You can click on the list view option to look at which resolution are you linking with. So let's say we're linking with the native high-res version of this asset, which could be sitting in your SAN. You can switch to a low-res version. The low-res version will be pulled from the MAM server. All the features that we support for the plugins are supported with VideoLX 2.0. If you want to do export, you can click on the exports panel inside Premiere or inside After Effects, and you can use the export button to create an export and essentially sync it automatically in the MAM. Now keep in mind, when you do an export, and even if the video was larger than the size limit that we had set up, it would be treated as a direct ingest and would go directly to the MAM database. If you wanted to export and have it go through the transcoder that we have, then instead of using our export, you could use the export presets, but just remove the checkbox, sync after export, so it would write the export to a user-defined location. And then from there, you can check in the exported video by clicking on, let's say, the sync button here, and that will start the check-in process. And anything that gets checked in will go through the VideoLX ingest workflow, then it will go into that transcode server.